The story begins on just another ordinary day, and our prota, whose name is Now, asks someone if the money for the month was enough, and the person on the other end says yes. After getting ready, he rushes out of the house and lets them know over the phone that he's already on his way to work. Now arrives at his destination and rings the doorbell of one of the neighborhood houses. An elderly woman answers and asks who is, immediately spotting the Idoku pharmaceutical business card. He introduces himself with a big smile, saying he is from the company's sales department. The woman gets furious right away and complains about being bothered by yet another salesman. She complains that they're always trying to push products on her and says she will only buy if he helps her with her groceries. Now accepts the deal right away and asks with great enthusiasm what she needs. Surprised by his goodwill, the lady replies that she just needs a little milk. Without wasting any time, the young man runs off, shouting that he will take care of it right now. The homemaker stands frozen at the door, completely amazed by his quick reaction. She yells after him to get the cheapest one, and Now promptly replies that he will. Shortly after, a carton of milk is already sitting on her kitchen table. She comments that he is a very straightforward and honest young man, and Now laughs, saying he hears that all the time. The lady confesses that she does not trust supplements, and asks if he also takes the products he sells. With a curious tone, she asks if those pills actually work. Now gets visibly embarrassed, and she remarks that he is too honest for his own good. The scene shifts to the main building of the pharmaceutical company where he works. Now's boss reprimands him in the office, saying that nobody closes deals by being nice, and the young man apologizes. The boss claims he is not cut out for sales and suggests he should simply resign. Now lowers his head, feeling an overwhelming weight and sadness from those harsh words. He remembers his father hospitalized in critical condition, surrounded by his crying family. The medical monitors beeped nonstop, showing his father's weak, vital signs. Now and his brother were suffering deeply from the tough situation their family was in. It was at that moment that he promised himself he would step up in his father's place to support everyone. He begs his boss to let him keep working, promising to visit 1,000 houses a day if needed. The boss sighs and decides to send the young man to handle a customer complaint in his place. Relieved and excited for the new chance, Now accepts the task right on the spot. He runs out of the office, all hyped up to fulfill his mission. Another employee questions the boss's decision, since that customer is dangerous and violent. The boss looks out the window and says he did it on purpose, just to see if the young man has any talent. Now arrives at the customer's house, rings the doorbell, and bows deeply while apologizing profusely. He begins to introduce himself as an employee of the company, but the resident glares at him with pure hatred. The man attacks Now with a knife to the chest, screaming in anger about that terrible health supplement. Now spits blood while the attacker shouts that his wife's condition did not improve at all. The young man falls wounded onto the entryway floor, noticing several empty medicine packages scattered across the house. He looks inside and realizes with horror that the man's wife has already passed away a while ago. Now's business card drops to the floor, stained with blood amid the tragic scene. Meanwhile, that elderly woman from earlier talks on the phone, saying she knows those products do not work. She continues, saying Now works so hard that it makes her want to buy just to help him out. The woman says she will praise him when he returns, unaware that the young man is already gone on the stairs. A system screen appears out of nowhere in the air, confirming Now's passing and calculating his achievements. The system announces that his life rank is only 1 star and begins distributing exclusive weapons. He receives a pair of shoes called 1,000 Visit Shoes as a life completion bonus. Now wakes up, startled and in a cold sweat from that whole bizarre situation. He gets up extremely confused, looking around without being able to understand where he is. His eyes go wide with shock at what he sees ahead. The glowing panel announces that the matching of 10 players was successfully completed. He realizes he is in the middle of a colorful amusement park with other people. Now touches his chest as he remembers he had just been stabbed by a customer. The young man notices his clothes are intact, and the terrible wound has vanished from his body. A muscular man in a bandana asks if he died too, and Now replies that he probably did. The guy explains that everyone there passed away, and they're in the afterlife, leaving the girl beside him surprised. Now grieves deeply and can hardly believe he was taken out by one of his own customers. He starts worrying intensely about his mother, thinking about the immense sorrow she will feel. Suddenly, a new person's legs begin to materialize right in front of him. The man in the bandana notices the skinny newcomer and wonders if it is a girl. A blonde guy with long hair fully appears in the middle of that bluish glow. The young blonde looks around terrified and asks softly where he is. The brute complains that another useless guy showed up, while Now tries to be friendly. The blonde trembles so much from fear that now does not quite know how to react. Now tries to calm him down and explains that this strange place seems to be the afterlife. Always very polite, now bows to hand over his card and introduces himself as Tsurugi, while the blonde says his name is Tatishi. Now notices the hand of his new companion and compliments the very cool lighter he is holding. He asks if the guy smokes while looking at the handsome gold lighter with carved wings. Tatishi gets quite bashful at the question and hesitates before answering. New blue screens pop up in the air, announcing that everyone has arrived and the tutorial quest is about to begin. Now gets confused and remarks that this transition makes the afterlife feel a lot like a video game. The screen outlines that they need to defeat the Park King within 1 hour to be able to return to the living world. The alert stresses that if all 10 people in the group are defeated, it will be complete failure. Now realizes he has a shot at coming back to life, but gets terrified by the actual danger of being eliminated. Looking at the dark scenery of the park, he feels he has entered a true survival game. Out of nowhere, a giant plush bunny drops down from above carrying a huge, colorful hammer. Now goes into total panic upon seeing the creature plummeting right toward them. In this moment of peril, the young man's new shoes start emitting a mysterious blue flame. He grabs Tatishi and manages to dodge the devastating blow that blows up the ground right behind them. The other survivors scream and stand in shock from the violent impact of the monster. Frightened, the players look at the size of the weapon and question what kind of rabbit that is. The giant bunny with a star design on its face glares at the humans in a threatening way. Now sets his friend down on the floor, tells them to run immediately, and celebrates dodging the attack. He realizes that the extraordinary speed he used came directly from his new shoes. The young man recalls that the system panel had classified that item as his exclusive weapon. Now screams in desperation to his companion, warning that the monster is charging at them again. Tatishi figures out that if the shoes are a weapon, now needs to use them to attack the enemy. Determined, now builds momentum and leaps high up, believing he can take down the opponent. He lands a kick right on top of the bunny's head, but deals only 1 point of damage. The young man realizes with dread that his strongest hit barely tickled the giant monster. Without losing time, the creature counterattacks with an extremely violent hammer swing. Now is struck head-on in midair by the crushing impact and spits blood from the force of the hit. The young man's body is launched against the floor of the amusement park in a brutal manner. He lies stretched out on the ground, completely defenseless and heavily injured after the fall. The giant bunny slowly approaches and raises its enormous hammer right above the fallen young man, lying on the floor. Now cries out in despair, thinking it is all over when a tiny flame sparks right in front of him. Tatishi lights his special lighter, producing a surprisingly large and bright blaze. The rabbit monster is engulfed in intense flames and starts screaming in pain amidst the fire. Now looks up in terror as he hears the giant creature's agonized shrieks. The massive bunny burns completely and turns into ashes right before Tatishi, who stays totally calm. The blonde young man observes the lighter in his hand, appearing surprised by the result of his attack. Right after, a system message alerts that Tatishi earned his first experience point. Now, and the other survivors who watch the whole thing are left completely speechless from sheer surprise. With great simplicity, the blonde guy looks at the group and asks if he want to bid overboard. The buff guy runs up to him excited and asks where he got that fantastic lighter. Tatishi explains it must be his life bonus and that the weapon simply appeared when he wished for one. Now finally understands that his new companion's lighter was also his exclusive weapon. He just does not get why their attack power is so different as more bunnies start showing up. Suddenly the man in the bandana shouts a warning that more monsters are heading their way. The man and the girl show off their new weapons with excitement and say they can fight now too. Now he tries to warn them that the power of each weapon is different and that rushing in blindly is very dangerous. However, the two defeat the new enemies with just a single simple strike and gain experience. Now feels upset and wonders why only his attack dealt practically no damage. He notices that the buff guy's screwdriver is 3 stars, and the girl's frying pan is 2 stars. Tatishi's fancy gold lighter, which caused all that destruction, is a 5-star. Now looks sadly at his 1-star shoe and tries to make sense of the difference between the weapons. He breaks into a cold sweat as he deduces the grim reality behind everyone's stats. The others notice his weapon is only 1 star and comment that he is super weak. Now gives an awkward smile as he realizes he was ranked as the worst survivor there. He remembers his modest past life and how everything was always a struggle for him to achieve. The young man accepts that even his passing and his afterlife bonuses were bottom tier. The system confirms once again that those simple 1-star shoes are his exclusive weapon. Now concludes, completely disheartened, that his own life was like a low rarity gacha pull. Tatishi tries to comfort his companion, suggesting that low power might mean something else is high. The blonde points out that a glowing gear icon is sitting right in the corner of the young man's field of vision. He explains that all he has to do is tap that icon to view all his stats. Now touches the virtual button and watches a blue holographic screen pop up right before his eyes. The screen displays character information, showing very unbalanced level 1 stats. He almost falls backward upon seeing that his attack power is literally just 1 point. However, the young man notices that his speed and jump are maxed out, indicating high agility. The man in the bandana suggests they share their stats and shows that his rank is 3 stars. Now looks at his companion's screen and becomes thoroughly discouraged again by the comparison. The girl reveals her 2-star stats and complains that they are pretty lame and disappointing. Curious, the man in the bandana turns to Now and asks what 1-star stats look like. Now hides his face out of sheer shame, while Tatishi tries to comfort his friend kindly. The muscular man notices the young man's embarrassment and gets the picture without needing an answer. Out of nowhere, another giant bunny creeps up behind the muscular man, who reacts quickly to the ambush. With great agility, the man spins his body and strikes the monster hard, sending it flying away. The panel alerts that he leveled up to level 2, and he feels super pleased with the quick progress. A new message reveals he received 500,000 yen as a reward, leaving him astonished. To everyone's shock, a literal rain of cash bills begins falling from the sky. Now watches the floating fortune drop, without being able to believe what he is seeing. Super hyped by the situation, the girl stretches her arms out and screams with joy at the sight of the money. But she tries to snatch her companion's bills and ends up getting a painful electric shock. The system displays a clear warning that stealing someone else's rewards is strictly forbidden. The girl is shocked to find out that they earn actual yen when they level up. Toyota reveals he was run over while fleeing loan sharks, and that this cash can be used in the real world. He remembers getting hit by a truck during his escape, while the tutorial timer keeps ticking down. The brute explains that returning to life broke would make 0 sense for him. Hearing that revelation, the young woman admits she also really wants to make bank. With that, the group of survivors begins grinding monsters relentlessly to level up. Now takes on the role of decoy to help the others without getting in the way. But things start getting dicey. He looks back and catches the silhouette of a rabbit watching him from the top of an attraction. The monster rushes forward to strike, but the young man manages to dodge with a nimble jump. Another giant bunny pops up out of nowhere right behind him, opening its massive mouth to bite him. He freezes completely in fear, realizing that getting hit is unavoidable. Now screams in panic, and Tatishi charges toward him, promising to save him right away. To everyone's surprise, Now desperately begs Tatishi not to defeat the monster. Toyota and the girl complain that the blonde guy is already strong and should leave the experience points for those who need them more. Cornered and feeling super guilty over their complaints, Tatishi hesitates, not knowing what to say. Now ends up getting hit hard by the rabbit for hesitating right when he was about to be saved. After the fight, the group continues walking through the huge, quiet amusement park. Toyota asks if they have already cleared all the enemies in the area, while the girl criticizes him for being too slow. Now walks with a bandage on his forehead, and Tatishi accompanies him with a bummed-out look. The young blonde apologizes for not helping him sooner, but now insists the fault lies in his own weakness. Tatishi disagrees and points out that Now was the first to stand up and fight bravely when everyone else panicked. He recalls the courageous leap the young man made right at the start to try and defeat the monster. Moved, the young blonde confesses that he considers Now the strongest person in that whole group. Now gets quite surprised and self-conscious upon hearing that genuine compliment from his companion. Blushing with embarrassment, he smiles shyly and asks if he really thinks that way about his actions. While chatting, the other survivors wonder when they will manage to clear the tutorial once and for all. With only half an hour left on the clock, they're startled by a strange sound echoing from afar. The two go on high alert and feel a chill as the atmosphere in the area suddenly changes. Out of nowhere, a massive, brightly lit parade emerges in the middle of the park with tons of fireworks. Dozens of plush bunnies are scattered all over the glowing float of that weird attraction. The young man observes that bizarre scene from a distance and wonders if it is some kind of victory parade. The players watch the floats passing by and are dazzled by the beauty of the lights. Atop the highest float stands a colossal rabbit wearing a shiny king's crown. Toyota looks up and immediately concludes that the giant rabbit with the crown has to be the stage boss. The girl gets super pumped, thinking about the insane amount of experience the monster will give whoever takes it down. The two look at each other in silence, consumed by greed to score valuable coins and rewards. Without hesitation, Toyota charges forward to try and kill the boss, while the young woman screams that she is coming too. The brute thinks that taking down the boss will guarantee a level up and way more cash than before. The massive creature raises its star staff, which begins charging terrifying blue lightning bolts. A colossal beam of electrical energy shoots down from above, hitting the area with extreme violence. Now, and Tatishi watched the impact of that power with expressions of pure horror and disbelief. One of the survivors, who rushed ahead, is completely vaporized into ashes by the brutal discharge. Another unlucky guy screams in agony. As his body burns under the relentless force of the electricity, the system alerts that the group now has only 9 members left due to the first loss of a companion. Now screams at the top of his lungs for the rest to run away. Immediately, the Rabbit King brings its massive staff down toward the ground to unleash another fatal attack. Once again, lightning quick, the young man rushes forward and grabs Tatishi to pull him out of harm's way. The violent shock wave sends both of them flying, making the young man let out a groan of pain as he hits the ground. He tries to get up to say he is fine, but freezes in horror when he looks at his friend. His arms now holds Tatishi in terror, while in the background, several charred bodies of the other players lie lifeless. The system screen updates, showing that now only 6 out of 10 survivors remain. Another player in a black cap screams in terror as more devastating lightning strikes fall around them. Now orders Tatishi not to go over there, but the blonde guy asks worriedly what he plans to do. With a brave smile, now states that he is heading over there to save the other survivors. Tatishi watches him in shock, unable to comprehend such courage at a moment like that. He charges quickly toward the girl, even though he secretly admits he was just pretending to be tough. He thinks with regret that he should have just accepted his place as a weak player. The young woman cries hysterically while clutching her frying pan, as now sprints to reach her before the monster does. The colossal Rabbit King once again charges its terrifying and deadly electric attack. The girl watches the blinding light coming closer and screams in panic, thinking she is going to die, but now leaps with everything he has to try to shove her out of the way of the fatal beam. He realizes that his own body moves on its own to help others, driven by his feelings. He remembers the terrible accident that left his father in a coma at the hospital for so long. He also recalls the humiliations at work and how he had always led a life deemed insignificant. Tatishi watches him from afar, touched by the determination and kindness shown by his companion. Now reaches out his arm in desperation, thinking about how heartbreaking his whole life journey had been. With tears in his eyes, he lets out a choked scream of pure frustration and despair. The massive lightning bolt strikes the area with a deafening roar, making the girl scream in terror. Tatishi mourns as he watches the scene, knowing that willpower alone is not enough to win here. The terrible Rabbit King continues to charge its staff with relentless electrical discharges. The creature aims its powerful blue staff straight at the fleeing girl. Desperate and crying heavily, she runs for her life, knowing she has no way to escape on her own. Now refuses to give up and shouts with determination that the fight is not over yet. The young man courageously places himself right in front of the giant boss and its entire monster army. He screams in rage at the giant rabbit that he hasn't lost yet and that he will prove the value of his life. Now runs at full speed to draw the creature's attention and serve as a target. He reveals he figured out a secret about the monster's terrible and destructive attack. He notices that the beam only travels in a straight line, so he can dodge it by switching directions. The young man begins counting the seconds in his head while dodging with agility. He reaches the 3rd second and focuses all his attention on the opponent's behavior. He realizes that after firing, the boss needs a 3-second cooldown, creating the perfect window to strike. Tatishi and the girl watch the whole thing in awe, praising the young man's brains and guts. However, the blonde guy's expression quickly changes, tensing up over a crucial detail. Now status screen pops up once more, showing his frail combat stats. He knows full well that his stats are too low to take down the enemy alone. He secretly laments that he lacks the attack power needed to deliver the finishing blow. The young man turns around and locks his eyes on his only 2 surviving teammates. He understands that the only way for everyone to make it out alive is by teaming up in battle. He desperately begs for their help so they can fight the boss together. Now offers to carry them at high speed right up to the Rabbit King, so they can land their hits. He warns that everyone will die if they stay still and promises he will use his speed to protect them. The girl screams in tears that he is just a weak 1-star who cannot defeat anyone. Now is left completely speechless and stunned upon hearing those harsh words from her. She complains that her own life was only 2 stars and that she had already accepted her bad luck. She recalls her rough childhood with terrible parents and the toxic relationship with her ex. The young woman falls to her knees, sobbing heavily, venting all her built-up frustration. She yells that she refuses to trust her life to someone even unluckier than her, just to avoid suffering more. Facing the girl's refusal, Tatishi looks at his 5-star lighter and makes a decision. He stands up firmly and states that he will make up for Nao's bad luck with the power of his 5-star weapon. The blonde entrusts the lead of the attack to the young man, while a strange contract-sealed message appears on the screen. From a distance, the brightly lit carousel ride houses the Rabbit King and its minions. Now carries Tatishi on his back, getting ready to execute the attack plan. The young man warns that he will charge right after the enemy's next blast, and the blonde confirms he understands. The colossal Rabbit King charges its staff once more with destructive lightning. Now focuses and supports his companion's weight on his back, setting his stance to dash. As soon as the monster fires the lightning, now sprints at top speed, carrying his friend along. Tatishi shouts a warning about enemies in the path, but now assures him it is all good. He uses his agility to kick the bunnies along the route, dealing only 1 point of damage. He takes advantage of the situation to use the monster's own heads as platforms to leap from. He realizes that his low attack power is actually ideal for not killing them and using them as footholds. He takes a massive leap and reaches the top of the attraction, coming face to face with the boss. Tatishi readies himself and sparks the gold lighter right toward the massive creature. An enormous burst of fire consumes the Rabbit King in a devastating blast. The blonde young man holds his lighter up in victory as the dust and fire begin to settle. The system panel confirms that Tatishi defeated the boss and earned 100 experience points. The screen alerts that the quest was completed and that they will return to the real world in 3 minutes. Now stares at the notification in shock, unable to believe they actually won the quest. Suddenly, he notices that the wound on his body has fully healed and is amazed. He deduces that clearing the quest heals all injuries and happily thinks of his other companions. But when he looks at the ground, he sees only the charred, lifeless bodies of Toyota and the other guy. The young man is deeply shaken as he realizes the tragic fate of his squad mates. To his relief, the surviving girl comes running toward him, shouting his name. She mentions they were the only survivors and eagerly asks about the results of Nao's gotcha pull. The young man gets totally confused by the term, not understanding what she is referring to. A new blue system screen floats into view, displaying an exclusive gotcha machine. Without hesitating much, the young man taps the virtual button to roll his pull. As the gotcha spins, he still wonders if the people who died were also saved. The system reveals he pulled another pair of the 1-star shoes and triggers a limit break. The young man feels totally frustrated upon realizing he drew a duplicate item from the pull. However, the panel displays that the limit break dramatically boosted all his stats. His eyes light up in surprise as he notices the massive bonus his stats received. He sees that his strength rose to 6, and his agility stats reached an incredible 15 points. The young woman claps excitedly and remarks that the limit break made his stats skyrocket. She happily reveals she won 1 million yen, leaving the young man's jaw dropped in astonishment. She hugs the young man out of nowhere, saying in a sweet tone that this is definitely destiny. The young woman asks if he wants to date her when they go back, leaving Now pretty confused. The young man notices that the girl's attitude and vibe completely did a 180. He awkwardly tries to change the subject while glancing at the charred body of their companion nearby. Suddenly, he feels a chill and widens his eyes as he notices something very wrong happening. In a split second, the girl is struck head-on by a powerful burst of fire. She screams in agony as her body is reduced to ashes right in front of Now. Tatishi appears right behind him with his lighter lit, saying they only have 3 minutes to chat. Now asks in horror why he did that, while the blonde calmly taps away at his panel. He formally introduces himself as Tatishi while changing his default outfit into a special skin. The guy explains with a smile that he equipped a custom game skin, though he admits now is probably not the time. He reveals to the shocked Prota that he is actually no newbie player in this world. He explains he entered that low-level zone to recruit promising new talents and ended up finding no. The blonde wraps his arm around the young man from behind possessively and asks if he has any questions about what happened. Trembling in terror, Now asks him point-blank why he just cold-bloodedly wiped out the girl. With a cryptic and creepy smile, Tadashi whispers in his ear that it was merely a selection process. He justifies it by saying that girl had higher stars than Now, but was completely useless. He explains that, unlike system data, you cannot judge someone's true capability based on rarity alone. Now feels disgusted by the blonde's coldness, while Tatishi compliments him, saying he showed the power and wisdom to guide the squad. Tatishi leans in close, staring at him with a piercing and unsettlingly calm gaze. Outraged, Now asks why he would do such a thing, while the blonde raises his arm with total indifference. Without warning, Tatishi shoves the Prota hard backward, sending him tumbling down. The blonde calmly sits on the royal throne, while now angrily asks the reason behind all of this. He fires back, saying he has zero patience for babysitting weak, useless players. With a smug grin, he shows off his precious 5-star gold lighter, now glares at him with immense rage and outrage, still unable to believe such cruelty. But the blonde chuckles and says the whole thing was just a bad joke and poor taste. He explains that provoking him and taking down the girl was just meant to make him mad and push his combat limits. The system screen glows, alerting that they will return to the real world in under 3 minutes. The blonde admits he hopes to fight now, with actual intent to kill during these remaining minutes. He challenges now to test out the real performance of his new limit-broken shoes. He even promises to become the young man's mentor if they manage to make it back to the real world alive. With a stern and firm look, now rejects the abusive offer without thinking twice. The blonde gives a sinister smile and replies that he has never failed to get whatever he wanted. He proudly states that it is because he is an elite 5-star player. The tutorial timer hits exactly 3 minutes, kicking off the final survival test. The opponent challenges the young man to try and survive his attacks for the rest of the time. A colossal fire serpent is summoned and lunges fiercely toward Now. He repeats mockingly that if the young man survives, he will have the honor of becoming his disciple. Now ignores the provocation and locks his attention completely on the floating screen's timer. The time starts counting down fast to 2 minutes and 59 seconds. He spots the rapid approach of the flame serpent and prepares to dodge the strike. With absolute focus, the young man calculates the exact instant to move to avoid getting hit. Out of nowhere, the massive fire creature opens its jaws right in front of him. Now Shu emits a bright blue flame as he pushes off the ground with a powerful leap. He moves with scary agility, leaving only a blue trail behind. He notices the attack is slower than the boss's lightning bolts and feels his body is amazingly light. The young man realizes that his shoe's limit break really did make his stats go through the roof. He is amazed upon noticing the true potential and ridiculous speed of that gear upgrade. The blonde remarks that the young man is moving way better than when he was alive. He explains that the serpents move at the boss's speed, and that Now simply got much faster. The blonde drops a annoying taunt about the fight, and Now seriously calls out his behavior. With a dark glare, the blonde claims with disdain that useless players have no right to refuse anything. Now keeps his composure, focusing purely on dodging every single threat around him. The opponent charges fiercely across the arena, launching more waves of fire at the young man. He says sadistically that Now better manage to dodge absolutely every single attack. Now pulls off insane acrobatic flips in midair to escape the fiery blazes. But as he touches down, the young man realizes with dread that the number of serpents has increased. The flame creatures start chasing him down and seem to be getting faster and faster. Now uses all his agility to zigzag and throw off the fire monsters. He sprints toward a wall to try and use the wall bounce momentum to dodge. One of the serpents crashes violently against the structure, missing the young man by a hair. He keeps his eyes wide open, calculating every millisecond with surgical precision. The young man leaps right into the middle of the fiery vortex to break out of the serpent's trap. However, he notices with horror that the opponent is already waiting to strike him on his way down. Yum watches him from the ground with a cruel smile, while Now desperately tries to find an exit. Now finds himself trapped in Tatishi's giant hand, feeling the immense pressure of his power. He tries to withstand the terrible fury of the flames, threatening to completely consume him. The young man gets extremely annoyed and asks if his opponent is messing with him. He angrily questions if that is really how a 5-star player is supposed to act. With a swift kick, he kicks away the blonde's taunts about becoming his master. He screams at the top of his lungs that Tatishi is nothing more than a coward who preys on rookie players. The opponent just gives a smug smirk and gives a thumbs up, throwing around gaming slang. Annoyed and exhausted, Now tells him to talk normally, and the blonde laughingly explains it is just gamer lingo. He mockingly teaches that combat weapons can also double as great defensive shields. Now angrily complains that he should have mentioned that defense mechanic way earlier. Tadashi says that if he died there, he would be useless, and Now fires back that he would never accept a killer as a master. The blonde fixes the young man with a sharp glare, showing he has no intent to go easy in this fight. Now curses his opponent internally, knowing the guy intends to force this bizarre scenario no matter what. The villain coldly warns that if he refuses, he will die right there, just like the other weak players. Now tense up as he realizes this guy's behavior is identical to that of a dangerous final boss. Tatishi readies his gold lighter and mockingly asks how he plans to dodge all the attacks now. A massive rain of fiery blazes begins crashing down from the sky toward the young man. The ground explodes in a massive wave of heat and destructive flames from the force of the impact. Giant, glowing wings of fire spread around Tatishi, lighting up the entire scene. His golden eyes glow intensely, reflecting the ruthless cruelty of his actions. A massive burst of golden energy sweeps across the amusement park entirely. The shockwave is so powerful that it destroys the metal structures of nearby rides. Floating with his majestic fire wings, the villain watches the destruction while now tries to hold his ground. The Proto screams in rage that it is impossible to block everything with 1-star stats. With a cynical smile, the blonde says game over for now, throwing out a common gaming abbreviation for defeat. In the final second left on the timer, now charges forward with everything he has to try to land a hit on the enemy. The young man mishes his teeth and launches himself at his opponent, determined to give. It is all until the very end. Suddenly, the timer hits 0 and now wakes up in his office, landing a punch right on his boss's shocked face. The young man stares at the boss lying on the floor, completely clueless as to what he just did. Everyone in the room stares at him in terror, whispering about the sudden assault on the manager. Desperate, the boss begs for forgiveness on his knees, apologizing for sending him out while knowing about the dangerous customer. Now stands frozen in shock upon hearing the boss talk about knife attack. He finds out that the unhinged customer actually tried to stab him and ended up arrested by the police. The manager cries and begs on his knees for the young man not to tell the board the truth about what happened. Now starts processing recent events with intense seriousness in his eyes. He questions whether that entire terrifying near-death experience was just a vivid dream. However, the system's floating gear icon glows right before his eyes, proving otherwise. The young man points into the air, but the confused manager says he is just a cog in the corporate machine. Now taps the virtual button and confirms that all that afterlife madness is very real. The panel reveals he is a rookie and displays the remaining time for his next mandatory daily quest. He worries if he will have to face those lethal challenges every single day from now on. The image of the colossal Rabbit King on its dark throne flashes through his mind. Suddenly, he notices a new alert flashing in the bottom corner of the holographic panel. A list of player names pops up beside a friend request sent by Yum Tatishi. Now recognizes the squad's names and wonders if, because he cleared the tutorial, they were resurrected too. He tries clicking the contacts to establish a line, but gets no response from the system. The young man decides to use his cell phone to look up information about his squad mates on the internet. He goes into shock reading a news report revealing that Erika Kawasaki was violently taken out by her ex. Other news articles confirm the passing of Taro Toyota in a hit and run and Saburo Suzuki in a car crash. Heart in hand, now realizes that every single member of his group passed away over the last week. Now looks at the list of names of those who died in the real world, except for one single person who is still alive. A coworker bursts into the room in a panic, shouting that a huge emergency just happened. The employee explains that they received a massive order and want to buy out the entire warehouse stock. The manager yells, asking who the buyer is, since those lousy supplements are basically just placebos. The employee reveals the buyer's name is Tatishi, and he demanded, now be the salesman in charge. Now remembers handing his business card to Tatishi and deeply regrets it. The Proto decides on the spot that there is no way he is meeting up with this dangerous buyer. He wants no part in dealing with a guy who hunts rookies and gets a kick out of watching others suffer. The young man recalls his childhood when people said his name carried the character for honesty. But he shakes his head, realizing things are not as simple as they seem. Facing Tatishi's friend request, now admits he cannot ignore what he saw in the tutorial. He knows Tatishi is a ruthless killer who tortures people and loves, tormenting his victims. Despite all that absurd cruelty, there's an extremely problematic catch about him. The truth is, Tatishi is the strongest player and now has less than 18 hours before the next quest. The Proto thinks of his own family in the hospital and knows he cannot afford to die again. He remembers Tatishi saying he never fails to get what he wants because he is a 5-star player. Now knows that accepting the invite means falling right into the villain's trap. Going there means putting himself completely at the mercy of an extremely dangerous psychopath. The manager grabs Now by the arms, begging him to go make the sale and become the company's top salesman. Meanwhile, under the full moon, Tatishi waits calmly in his luxury high-rise apartment, overlooking the city skyline. He watches the system panel showing that the friend request sent to Now is still pending. On the other side, the Proto keeps staring at that blue screen, demanding an immediate response. The night silently progresses over the big city while the buildings keep their lights on. now walks down the dark streets, looking super tense and worried about the direction things are taking. He breaks into a cold sweat, thinking about what the best call would be to ensure his survival. The young man recalls Tatishi's mockingly harsh words, stating that weaklings have no right to choose. Now grips a door handle, trying to convince himself that everything will work out in the end. He takes a deep breath and turns the handle firmly to face whatever comes next. The young man opens the door and steps into the lit room, leaving the dark hallway behind. With a serious and determined look on his face, he prepares to tackle the situation head-on. Suddenly, a little girl with long hair breaks into a huge smile and lets out a joyful shout. She runs toward him, clutching a plush bunny, and welcomes her big brother back. Now his heart melts on the spot, and he flashes a gentle, loving smile at his sister. He says he is back and notices Natsu's hair grew, but she replies she let it grow to sell it for extra cash. The young man tells her not to worry about finances, as he and Mom would handle that, but remembers that was a few hours ago. The scene flashes back to the office a few hours earlier, when Now picked up Tatishi's call in place of his boss. On the other end of the line, Tatishi says he wants a sample of the product brought to his place right now. To everyone's shock in the room, the Prota firmly tells the client not to buy the supplement. The villain gets pretty surprised and asks what he meant by that unexpected answer. Without offering further explanations, Now hangs up the phone on Tatishi once and for all. He announces that his shift is over and decides to completely turn down the psychopath's invite. Knowing he might not survive the next mandatory quest, the young man made this call so he would have zero regrets. He visited his family to say goodbye and left all his important papers and insurance policy safely stored for them. Catching a nice aroma coming from a kitchen, he happily remarks that it smells like his favorite curry. Usually, their meal is pretty basic, just onions in the usual simple recipe. However, the little girl excitedly reveals that today's menu is special, and they will have high-grade beef curry to celebrate. Fancy beef finally joins the onions in the pot to create the best possible feast for the family. Now is surprised and asks if it isn't overkill to throw a party just because he decided to come home. But his little sister says with a cheeky face that the company's #1 salesman must be making tons of money. Hearing that, the young man is left speechlessly stunned, realizing the size of a misunderstanding he created at home. Now tenses up and asks who she heard that rumor from, about him being the top salesman. Right at that moment, Tatishi pops out from behind a beaded curtain with a cynical smile. The villain watches from afar as Now interacts with his little sister. Inside the house, Tatishi mockingly says he already feels right at home and calls the Prota his best friend. The young man freezes completely in hatred and shock upon seeing the killer inside his home. Now loses his cool and charges forward furiously, grabbing Tatishi's collar to confront him. Seeing that violent reaction, little Natsu gets confused and calls out for her big brother. Now angrily whispers for him not to involve his family, but Tatishi reminds him that weaklings have no right to choose. The young man fires back that is only in the game and threatens to take him out right there before the next daily quest. The villain finds the threat amusing, but quickly cuts the Prota's mood short with a serious warning. He whispers that saying that out loud in front of other players instantly gives away that he is just a naive rookie. Tatishi explains that they can now only die for real inside the survival games world itself. That happens because any death occurring in the real world gets patched by the system as if it were just a glitch. The blonde warns that if Now really wants to protect his family from any real danger, he needs to channel all his strength purely into trying to eliminate him when they are inside the game. Otherwise, the villain leaves a terrifying threat hanging in the air regarding what could happen to the people around him. He sadistically asks if Now wants to test how the system would react if he hurt his dear family. Natsu grows curious about all that closeness and asks what the two were whispering about so much. Now quickly pulls back from the villain to hide the tension and tries to smooth things over. The Prota fakes a cheerful smile and lies, saying it is just confidential work business. The little girl makes a suspicious pout, but accepts her big brother's silly excuse. On the living room TV, the news reports that a dangerous fugitive on the run is still at large in the area. Meanwhile, Now's mom washes the dishes in the kitchen. While listening to news about the suspect's unknown whereabouts, Mom talks nervously about the killer, and Tatishi, helpful, jokingly suggests they stay at his place to stay safe. Mom finds it funny and praises the young man's good humor, leaving Now with a super annoyed look on his face. She insists on finishing the dishes herself and suggests the two young men go relax together at a local bathhouse. The blonde loves the idea and enthusiastically invites Now to go take a dip together. The Prota is fuming mad at his rival's nerve, but has no way to turn down the situation. Tatishi remarks that taking a bath together is the ultimate negotiation tactic and asks if Now doesn't want that too. He notices the villain is enjoying his discomfort and swears to himself that things won't be easy for that 5-star. So, now fakes friendliness and accepts the invite, asking sarcastically if they're going to scrub each other's backs. To the prota's total surprise and dismay, the blonde responds with complete sincerity that yes, he wants to do exactly that. The blonde drags the young man out, while mom notices in surprise that her sweet son is dropping cuss words. Soon, the two arrive at the neighborhood's traditional public bathhouse under the starry sky. They walk past the door marked for the men's section and prepare to enter the hot water. The two settle into the large thermal tub beneath the beautiful painting of Mount Fuji on the wall. Out of patience for beat around, the bush talk now gets straight to the point and asks what the villain actually wants from him. Tatishi says his wish already came true, since he just wanted to see what kind of life a mere one-star rookie who managed to survive leads. He adds dismissively that, for a weakling with such a sweet family, whoever picked him for the game must have terrible taste. But he quickly changes his mind and says he would make the same pick, leaving the young man super intrigued and suspicious of the weird compliment. Suddenly, the villain touches on a sensitive topic and asks if Now still remembers that 2-star girl he burned down. The panel shows Erika Kawasaki's tragic backstory, suffering at the hands of terrible parents and a lousy boyfriend. The villain explains that she blamed the world for her misfortunes, and thus used evil methods without hesitation just to try to survive. However, he fixes his piercing gaze on the prota and claims Now lacks the capability to act. That selfishly, he brings up the hardships Now faced having to work young to pay off his sick father's debts, without ever complaining about his family. Tatishi points out that the young man's love for his family stops him from doing crazy stuff, forcing him to always play the good guy. The villain concludes that someone so nice with such a rough life is the absolute definition of an unlucky 1-star player. He questions if the young man is really going to risk his neck in the next quest, and sarcastically suggests he become an apprentice killer. In a sudden move, the blonde gets even closer in the tub and gives a light slap on his companion's shoulder. Now's mind travels back to the tragic day. His father was violently struck by a drunk driver without a license. Now remembers his father throwing himself in front of the car, using his own body to shield him and his little sister from the crash. The young man recalls the panic of holding his sister in his arms, while people around shouted for an ambulance. Worst of all was watching the drunk driver step out of the car, cussing out Now's father and blaming the victim for the accident. But the man lost his nerve instantly upon seeing the look of pure murderous rage on young Now's face. Without thinking twice, Now flew at the driver with a devastating flying kick of pure hatred. The kick connected flush with the guy's face, letting out all the rage and pain of that tragic moment. Now remained standing, staring down at the knocked-out driver on the ground, while the other passenger in the car shook in terror. The young man's hatred was so overwhelming that he couldn't stop and wanted to finish those guys off for good. He ripped open the car door brutally to grab the other passenger, who screamed desperately for his life. Now delivered another violent blow to the man to make sure he paid for what happened too. The young man kept beating the culprits without showing an ounce of mercy or hesitation. His rage was completely out of control, and the beatdown would only stop when nothing was left. He was covered in blood, looking like a literal monster consumed by the desire for revenge. Suddenly, his little sister's voice calling out for their dad in the middle of the chaos snapped Now back to reality. The young man halted the attack instantly, upon realizing what he was doing in front of his own family. He backed away from the car and collapsed exhausted, realizing he had almost turned into a cruel killer that day. Thanks to his sister's cries and presence, Now managed to stop before it was too late and before he ruined his life. That painful memory still haunts the prota's mind, even after all this time. Now explains his father took on debts to help his employees during the crisis, and that he himself avoided becoming a killer thanks to his sister. He stands up determined and says he prefers to keep doing what is right, even if it is the harder path. The prota firmly warns that he will complete the daily quest on his own, without Tatishi's help. The villain watches Now walk away, and laughingly comments that his negotiation tactic at the bathhouse totally flopped. He admits to himself that he thought the young man would be stronger if he got mad, but he was mistaken. Tatishi remembers using his destructive powers in the tutorial while the prota tried to take him on. He gives a faint smile, remembering the massive gap in power that exists between the two players. The villain compares that flying kick full of hatred from Now's past to the weak skills he has now. He shakes his head laughing and enjoys the hot water while planning his next moves in the game. He playfully laments that he isn't at his own place, so he could act freely as he would like. Later, outside, Nao's mom friendly asks if Tatishi wants to spend the night at their place. Nao steps in right away and says his friend needs to leave because he has work commitments early the next morning. Tatishi says goodbye to Natsu in a super affectionate and charming way, waving at the little girl. However, little Natsu stares at the villain with a look of pure boredom and absolute suspicion. The blonde feels awkward upon realizing he was completely ignored by the girl's cuteness. He asks what he did to make the girl hate him, and now replies bluntly that he just gives off total creep vibes. As the two walk away chatting, Mom and Sis keep watching the guys from the doorway. Tatishi keeps that cryptic smile that hides his true sadistic intentions. His eyes glow with a dangerous intensity, showing he hasn't given up on Nao just yet. The proto waves back, wishing him a good night, while continuing to walk beside his worst enemy. Natsu squeezes her plush bunny against her chest and grumbles angrily, still annoyed by Tatishi's presence. Time passes, and the day dawns sunny and peaceful in Nao's family neighborhood. Nao's mom remarks with relief that the troublesome client who tried to attack him was finally caught by the police. She says he should get proper treatment, while Nao laughs nervously, remembering he almost got stabbed for real. He gazes at the invisible system panel and notices the deadline for the next mandatory quest is running out. With only 1 minute left before midnight, the virtual clock alerts to the imminent start of the challenge. The system updates the timer to the exact moment he will be transported to the game world. The villain had warned that they would hardly play together again due to the massive level gap between them. He revealed they were only in the tutorial together because he used a rare and expensive item that wouldn't be worth spending again. This means the new allies now will have to fight alongside, and the next quest will be complete strangers. Now we'll have to deal with the despair of ordinary people who will do anything to run away or survive death. Either way, all participants will be survivors who also manage to clear the terrible tutorial. He reflects that daily quests should be easy, as long as no completely insane player shows up. Nao's mom says she is happy he made it out alive from that situation and reminds him that life has ups and downs. She encourages him, saying he has always been a very honest boy and that he must keep moving forward with confidence. Nao gets quite touched by his mom's affection and cracks a nice smile of gratitude. The very next second, the timer hits 0 and he is instantly transported to a colorful dance floor. To Nao's absolute dismay, Tatishi pops up out of nowhere right behind him with a huge grin on his face. The proto gets startled and tries to swing a punch at the blonde, but the villain dodges the hit with total ease. Nao shouts furiously because he already knew he would do that, but Tatishi mocks him, saying expensive items are like cheap candy to him. The villain warns that this time he won't lift a single finger to help and will wait for everyone else to be eliminated. He looks at the proto with disdain and tells Nao to do whatever he wants in the arena. Suddenly, a beam of yellow light cuts through the air at high speed toward the proto. A bald man with long hair appears swinging a dangerous knife attack, but Nao manages to dodge in the nick of time. The two quickly back away and prepare for the next move on that colorful dance floor. The criminal demands Nao stop dodging because he needs to gain experience points and steal his escape money. Nao wipes a small bloody cut on his cheek and takes a good look at the attacker's face. The young man recognizes the man immediately and realizes he is the famous fugitive from the police who appeared on the TV news. He confirms the identity of the dangerous criminal while dodging another lethal knife slash. With a serious and focused look, Nao realizes he will have to fight with everything he has if he wants to survive this lunatic. The proto looks around and is shocked to see several bodies of other players lying down covered in blood. Tatishi praises the killer's quickness in taking down the others for experience, leaving the criminal pretty confused. The blonde cracks a weird smile and says he will turn the killer into his new disciple too. The criminal feels a chill down his spine and gets completely terrified by Tatishi's creepy presence. He can't understand what is happening, but his gut screams loud and clear that this blonde guy is extremely dangerous. Tatishi's aura is so terrifying that the killer realizes he doesn't stand a chance, fighting him toe-to-toe. Tatishi says his other disciple is way too nice and wants the killer to be the perfect rival to make him grow. The panel reveals that the quest objective is to defeat the Disco King and that the group will fail if everyone is eliminated. The blonde finds the situation hilarious and tells the team to hurry up and take down the stage boss once and for all. The eccentric Disco King appears in the center of the floor, doing dramatic and flashy dance poses. The fugitive killer gets confused by the monster's name, while Nao approaches him with a locked-in look. The criminal ignores the game boss and decides to go after Nao to try to get his experience at all costs. He charges with knife in hand, screaming that all the experience points in this stage belong solely to him. However, Nao dodges with mastery and lands a devastating counterkick that sends his rival airborne. The criminal spits spit and groans in pain, feeling the tremendous impact of the prota's kick. Nao holds his opponent in midair with total ease and earns his first system experience points. With a dark and intimidating glare, Nao asks if he was the one who ended the lives of all the other players in the arena. The killer realizes Nao is also extremely dangerous and panics upon seeing his life is on the line. Desperate, he tries to lie, saying he didn't kill anyone and blames the stage monsters for the deaths. Now doesn't flinch at the blatant lie and lands another powerful kick that slams the criminal into the ground. The protist seizes the opening and executes a swift spin to keep up his relentless combo. At the same time, he takes the opportunity to defeat the boss's minions, stacking up even more experience points. He levels up and earns a sweet cash reward, telling the rival that he is the only one around holding a knife. The criminal realizes his lie was exposed and gnashes his teeth in pure frustration and pain. From afar, Tatishi watches the fight laughing and wonders if Nao has already realized what is about to happen. Nao keeps up his fight, clearing the dance floor and taking down more opponents with his accurate kicks. The villain notices that those minions Nao takes down so easily are the same level as the monster that beat him up before. The prota suddenly halts his combat upon noticing a strange glow from a giant musical note above him. With a deafening boom, the colossal Disco King makes its grand entrance onto the battle arena. Nao reacts fast and readies himself to dodge any charge from the powerful giant boss. The monster executes a lethal spin choreography that creates devastating energy waves across the floor. After accumulating another 100 experience points, the system displays the panel confirming Nao leveled up to level 3. Upon defeating the boss, the system confirms Nao leveled up to level 4 and even scored an exclusive gacha ticket as a reward. He uses the ticket and gains another pair of shoes, automatically triggering a limit break to fuse the items. With this fusion, Nao's attack, defense, agility, and jump stats receive a massive system boost. The young man glows brightly as his 1,000-step shoes reach a tier of strength much higher than before. Tatishi explains that the survival rate of a 1-star rookie is under 1%, and whoever beats those odds has limitless growth. Nao just listens to the villain's words in silence. With a focused and very serious look, the prota begins walking coldly toward the injured killer, who screams, begging him to wait a minute. The criminal cries, begging for his life, saying he has a family to care for, but Nao shows zero mercy. The young man gnashes his teeth and coldly replies that that is just a huge, ironic coincidence. He steps on the killer's head and relentlessly states that he also has a beloved family to protect. He harshly reminds him that all the innocent people that Monster killed in the arena also had families. The criminal widens his eyes in pure panic, realizing the prota is about to end him without hesitation. Suddenly, Tatishi shows up behind Nao and mockingly asks if he didn't want to play the good guy. The blonde warns that little Natsu would cry if she found out her brother turned into a killer, making the criminal agree desperately. The killer begs the master to save him, but Tatishi shows an expression of pure disgust for his minion. The villain says he disowned the killer because he doesn't need a weak follower who gets beaten so easily by others. Even humiliated, the criminal remains trapped under Nao's firm foot, crying in pain and pure desperation. Tatishi asks what excuse he will use to kill him, but Nao reveals he sent a friend request to his rival. The killer gets completely confused, not understanding why that furious young man sent a friend request. The system panel pops up in front of the killer's eyes, with a request sent by the prota. Nao explains that if they are system friends, they can share locations and form a party in the game. He sets the condition that the villain must turn himself into the police in the real world, or always play in his party under threat of death. And he adds that if he rejects the friend request now, he will be eliminated right there on the dance floor. Seeing no other way out, the killer tearfully accepts the request, begging for his life to be spared. Tatishi watches the scene and claps his hands with his flames, glowing in a very satisfied and cheerful way. Suddenly, Nao's eyes go wide as he hears a desperate scream from the criminal, who starts getting burned alive. The killer is completely swallowed by Tatishi's destructive golden flames. Agonizing on the floor, Tatishi mocks Nao's attempt to play warden to keep his pacifist justice and make his sister happy. Holding his gold lighter, the villain says Nao's plan was great, except for the fact that he was standing right there. The criminal's body lies completely charred on the dance floor, giving off smoke. Now calls out his rival's name with an expression of pure rage and resentment over what just happened. But to everyone's surprise, the protest simply thanks the villain in a calm and serious tone. Tatishi widens his eyes in surprise to hear Now say he was ready to take the blame for letting him live. But the villain took that burden off him. He adds with a slight smile that he still doesn't approve of rookie hunting, but that now he no longer has the right to judge his rival. Tatishi pulls a face of extreme disgust and revulsion at the young man's attitude, leaving the prota pretty confused. The blonde kicks Now to push him away and complains, saying he is way stronger when he is angry, so he needs to stop thanking him. He insists the prota accept his friend request and suggests it is high time he visited Player City. Now gets quite intrigued hearing about this mysterious place for the first time. The villain just smirks and starts tapping on his floating holographic panel. He warns mysteriously that this survival game is way more complex than it looks at first glance. Right after, the system displays the notice confirming the temporary return of the survivors to the real world. Back at the Real train station, Tatishi explains that it is possible to access Player City from any subway station. He shows a blue system card and says all it takes is using the infinite free pass located in the item menu. The blonde swipes the card at the turnstile, making a sound, and tells him he is heading in first. The proto watches his friend pass through the turnstile with a very surprised and attentive look. To Now's amazement, Tatishi instantly vanishes in a flash of blue pixels as soon as he steps through the turnstile. The young man's jaw drops, witnessing that magical transformation happen right in the middle of a public train station. He looks closely at the regular people around and notices that absolutely no one seems to have noticed Tatishi's sudden disappearance. The normal passengers keep walking peacefully, going about their daily routines as if nothing had happened. Now takes a deep breath and approaches the station turnstile with a focused look, determined to test the mysterious pass. He gets thoughtful and realizes the system not only covers up deaths, but also patches all these weird occurrences for normal people. Now reaches out his hand and presses the virtual panel button to check his rewards menu. He notices the infinite free subway pass and also an impressive balance of 1,500,000 yen in cash. Now almost trips backward in shock upon seeing that pile of cash, and remembers those are rewards for leveling up. He swallows hard and wonders if he can actually withdraw all that money in the real world using the system menu. To test it out, the young man decides to run a withdrawal simulation and selects the amount of 1,000 yen on the screen. A real 1,000 yen bill materializes before his eyes in a glow of light, leaving the young man wide-mouthed. But he quickly gets suspicious and starts inspecting the money carefully, fearing it might be counterfeit or illegal. He inserts the bill into a vending machine, and it accepts the cash normally, dispensing a bottle of green tea. He takes a nice sip of the tea super happily, confirming that system money is 100% real and legit. Tatishi completely loses patience with the young man's foolishness and lands a kick right on Now's. But the free pass card displays Now's official info, including his age of passing at 20 years old. Tatishi tells him to go through the turnstile first, but Now gets thoughtful reading the term world of the dead written on the card. The moment he steps through the gate with the card, the young man is enveloped in a bright and powerful blue energy. He shuts his eyes tight to protect himself from the intense glare of that dimensional subway portal. Opening his eyes slowly, he comes face to face with a completely different and breathtaking scenery. Before him stands a massive Player City, an incredible place where only those who survive death twice can enter. This place is also well known among veteran players by the name Butterfly Street. Now notices the afterlife looks a lot like a futuristic city filled with a blend of advanced tech and pure magic. He starts walking down the station stairs calmly, admiring every detail of that fantastic new world. The young man spots a street vendor with his traditional cart parked right under a large red archway. The vendor offers a famous butterfly candy, announcing with a big smile that it costs 3,000 yen apiece. Now almost faints hearing the ridiculous price, shocked by the inflation of that world of the dead. But he gazes at the pretty floating candy shaped like a glowing butterfly fairy and gets a huge urge to try it. He drools with craving, thinking he could never sample something like that in the real world. Plus now his pockets are full of cash. The young man buys the glowing candy and tries to convince himself that it is just a fair reward for all his hard work. However, the shopkeeper cracks a devious side smile while secretly manipulating his holographic panel. In the merchant guild chat, the scammer celebrates, tricking the rookie and plans to take him to a bar to wipe out all his cash. He laughs to himself, thinking what else he can push on the young man, until a hand reaches out from the shadows and grabs him firm. Tatishi grabs the scammer hard and sarcastically says, charging 3,000 yen for something that costs 10 yen to make is an outrageous ripoff. The blonde smiles, saying he is actually thankful, since his disciple was poor his whole life and loses his mind seeing a $1 million in his wallet. While Now walks along innocently enjoying the candy, Tatishi demands the merchant make up for his mistake by helping them. Later, they end up at a charming bar and order exotic drinks that glow magically on the table. Now is completely amazed as he watches. The drink's liquid transform into tiny floating butterflies of light. The terrified bartender says they offer an open bar for just 2,000 yen, and the proto cheers that he can drink as much as he wants. Tatishi agrees, laughing, and mocks the bar's quality, while the scammer bartender sweats in pure terror, serving the two customers. The blonde proposes a friendly toast to celebrate their reconciliation and seal the start of a great friendship. Now gladly accepts the toast and clinks his glass with Tatishi's with a much calmer and relaxed look. Now asks if opening shop there without a legal license is allowed, and Tatishi fires back, laughing that would be like trying to file taxes on game rewards. The proto agrees and asks if they're part-time jobs that only function inside that spirit world. Tatishi confirms yes, and reveals jobs range from clearing quests for others to acting as a mercenary or high-end bodyguard. Many players make fortunes acting as hired mercenaries to protect wealthier rookies during quests. He reveals that a ticket to enter the tutorial costs 10 million yen, which leaves Now shocked, as it is 5 times his annual salary. The blonde adds that to make serious bank and get filthy rich in this world, the only path is focusing on ranking up. The tier system shows earnings skyrocket insanely at each level, especially for those who reach elite rank. Tatishi reveals the top players can participate in the final quest, whose reward can grant absolutely any wish. Upon hearing that incredible revelation, the proto gets completely lost in thought about what he would wish for if he won the game. He remembers his dad lying in the hospital bed and wonders if that ultimate wish could cure him once and for all. But he quickly considers that as his rank goes up, game enemies and monsters will definitely get way more powerful and dangerous. Either way, picturing his smiling little sister gives the proto all the motivation he needs to keep fighting. He breaks into a cold sweat, thinking that if he ends up dying in this dangerous game, there will be no one left to protect his beloved family. Now looks at his balance of almost 1,500,000 yen and wonders if it is really worth risking so much to rank up. He says he will think about it, but Tatishi warns with a cynical smile that the young man actually has no choice at all. The villain tells the proto to reach gold rank no matter what, even if it costs him his own life. Now forces a friendly smile on the outside, but inside he is boiling with pure rage and frustration at his rival's nerve. He tells Tatishi to learn how to talk without using violence, warning that if he can't even do that, the life of a 5-star player like him won't be worth a single thing in the end. Tatishi ignores the lecture and calls the bartender, ordering him to prep a quick round of drinking games. The proto decides to play along and reaches out his arm to grab his drink glass. The bartender serves the shots with a trembling hand, getting super worried about the direction of the situation. He knows those top-shelf shots are crazy expensive and aren't included in the venue's open bar deal. The bartender realizes this is the perfect chance to pull off a huge scam and strip all of Now's cash. He notices the young man is so annoyed with the villain that he threw all maturity out the window to drink it all down. Now grabs his glass firmly, determined not to let himself be intimidated by Tatishi's taunts. He says he will play as long as the villain covers the whole tab, not caring about the place's outrageous prices. Hearing that bold reply from Now, both the blonde and the bartender are caught totally off guard. The young man gives a clever smile and warns them not to try pulling any extortion scam on him tonight. Tatishi stares at the proto with a look of admiration, loving to see his new disciple's cleverness. The blonde bursts out laughing and admits he was outsmarted by the proto's clever trick. He confesses he planned to use the merchants to steal Now's cash, but the young man pretended to fall for the scam just to score free booze. The blonde proudly praises Now's sharp wit, stating he is a disciple worthy of respect. Now gives a side smirk and replies sarcastically that he learned it all thanks to his scammer master. The two laugh together in a relaxed way, leaving the poor bartender shaking in panic, unable to understand that insane duo. Now downs his last sip and announces he is heading home first, asking if the villain will finally let him leave in peace. However, the blonde's response comes short and instant, making it clear there is zero chance of that. Tatishi begins dissolving into blue pixels and warns that next time, Now will have to look for him on his own. The proto watches his rival vanish until his real phone in his pocket starts ringing persistently. He gets super intrigued and confused, wondering about the true meaning of Tatishi's cryptic warning. Suddenly, a terrible gut feeling crosses his mind, and the young man breaks into a cold sweat of pure dread. Now's heart races as he considers that his family might be in real life-threatening danger. He pulls the phone out of his pocket quickly and sees the incoming call is from his dear mother. With shaking hands and a pale face from anxiety, the young man answers the call immediately to find out what happened. He screams in desperation over the phone, begging his mom to answer quick and say everything is fine at home. On the other end of the line, Mom answers yawning in her pajamas, calmly asking what happened for him to call at that hour. Hearing his mom's calm voice and seeing everything is peaceful, now lets out a huge sigh of relief. He seriously warns her not to open the door for Tatishi under any circumstances, and to call him right away if the blonde shows up. Now tries to hide his concern, stammering that it is nothing major. While pulling up his system map, he checks his rival's location on the friend list and confirms Tatishi is in a completely different part of the city. The young man admits to himself that he was just acting tough, but that in reality, he is terrified of Tatishi's cruelty. Either way, he reinforces the plea for his mom to alert him immediately if the villain pops up at their house. Heart now settled, he hangs up the call and puts his cell phone back in his pocket. The bartender remarks that now has terrible luck for becoming the target of a monster like that, admitting that even for a scammer, the blonde is way too insane. He asks if the young man is looking for work and warns that operating without a guild is dangerous, offering to introduce him to a contact as an apology for the scam. Now, tenses up hearing about mob-style beatings and realizes that spirit world functions like a literal mafia underworld. He hesitates, thinking he might get mixed up with super dangerous people, when suddenly a magical light sparks beside him at the table. A mysterious young girl wearing an eye patch places her hand on his shoulder and asks if he's looking for a warrior guild. She introduces herself in a super relaxed way and invites the Prota to join her guild named Sotungo. She says she is heading out to hunt monsters in a special cherry blossom event and reveals even 2-star rookies can take part in the fight. She winks charmingly and playfully asks if the young man wants to spend the night with her on this quest. Both the Prota and the bartender are left completely speechless and blushing at the girl's bold proposal. The bartender whispers to Now, telling him he really shouldn't join this weird girl's guild under any circumstances. The young man sighs in frustration, thinking he really has a magnetic pull for attracting weirdos into his life. He decides to give a shot and accesses the special spring quest titled Return of the Vengeful Cherry Blossom Hunt. The stage objective is to gather glowing cherry blossom petals and safely escape through designated extraction points on the map. And so, the Prota finds himself in the middle of an incredibly beautiful forest, packed with pink cherry blossom trees. He starts working in silence, collecting petals, almost as if he were at a regular part-time job. A few hours earlier at the bar, the eye patch girl asked point blank why the manager told Now not to work with her. She revealed with a smile that it is probably because anyone who joins her guild ends up getting beaten up by rivals. Hearing that bizarre revelation dropped so casually, Now and the bartender are left completely lost for words. She explained that the mercenary group from the influential Chiodo Guild, which the bar manager himself belongs to, is the one doing that. The Chiodo Guild basically functions as a massive, dangerous Yakuza crime syndicate in this spirit world. Low-ranking members get brutally beaten if they don't pay a monthly protection fee to the faction bosses. Their violence is extreme, and they don't hesitate to hurt anyone who refuses to follow the gang's strict rules. She vented that they corner quest profits and that it pisses her off deeply, which is why she decided to act independently. Now notices her eye patch and silently wonders if those Yakuza thugs were the ones who caused that injury. He reflects on Tatishi being so strong and wonders why the villain lets this criminal underworld keep existing. He recalls Tatishi's selfish philosophy that the weak have no right to voice opinions or change things. In fact, the blonde seemed to be precisely the type of sadistic person who would fuel this general chaos and violence. Now, lets out a long sigh and accepts he shouldn't look for more trouble than he already has in his life. But he remembers Natsu's sweet smile and knows he couldn't face her if he left that eye patch girl to fend for herself. Overcome with courage and resolve, the Prota looks at the young girl and announces once and for all that he will take the job. Back to the present, Now is dazzled, admiring the pretty pink trees glowing under the forest light. The magical scenery with mountains in the background makes it look like he is in a true spring dream. She says many people hold picnics at the extraction points, and Now remarks surprised that this doesn't look like a lethal game at all. The girl points to a picnic blanket laid out on the grass and explains those areas are the stage's escape points. The checkered mat glows with a virtual escape indicator, confirming a safe exit for players. She catches one of the petals falling gently from the tree and continues explaining the rest of the game plan. Now reaches out his hand and grabs a glowing petal. Watching the system counterlog another item collected, she tells the young man to check the event's item exchange menu, while EQ complains about her calling him kid. The event panel shows that the grand prize for 10,000 petals is a pet monster named Massager Slime. Now gets completely confused and wonders what on earth that weird system term means. The young eye patch girl cracks a proud, excited smile to explain the new feature to the Proto. She explains Yamamon are underworld pet monsters, and now cuts her off, saying he just needs to focus on the petals. She shows that there's also an option to redeem a janitor slime, leaving the Proto super interested in their market value. She reveals that each of these pets is worth 20 million yen, which leaves the young man completely shocked and hyped up. The young girl explains the price is sky high because buyer demand is huge and market supply is low, driven by that multi-million value. Nio uses all his door-to-door salesman agility to scoop up petals at light speed. The young man gets yen, symbols flashing in his eyes from pure greed and happiness over the easy profit. However, he tries to grab one more regular petal falling from the tree and notices it doesn't give off the system glow. He realizes frustrated that it was just a normal petal reflecting the forced sunlight. He picks up another from the ground and confirms, annoyed that that one too is just a regular pink leaf. The young man keeps analyzing the leaves falling around him and discovers that absolutely all of them are normal. He realizes with horror the scale of the problem and notes that finding 10,000 glowing petals in a month is like hunting 4 leaf clovers. She complains angrily that the event demands a quota of over 300 petals a day, and that the prize is only rare because the quest is awful. She says almost everyone gives up on the big prize and trades their points for dango skewers, which explains the slime's multi-million value. However, now keeps a serious and steady gaze, remembering he spent his whole life knowing he has 0 luck. He recalls his childhood, when little Natsu really wanted a 4-leaf clover as a birthday gift. Back then, Young now knew full well that relying on luck or chance was never a realistic option for him. Because of that, the most efficient and guaranteed method he learned early on to get what he wanted was hard work. With that focused and relentless mindset, he grips the first real, glowing petal with total firmness and resolve. Now manages to snatch another glowing petal falling from the tree and earns more system points. Hyped over the easy gain, he starts doing a total sweep of the area, grabbing everything he sees. Ahead, now celebrates his success big time and excitedly asks how Kagamina-sensei is doing. He walks over to the eye patch girl, who is sitting peacefully drawing on her digital tablet. She calls the young man kid and warns she is swamped with work, so she can't move to help him. She shows off a sketch of a cute kitty and tells him to collect the petals solo, promising to pay way above market rate, facing the artist's lazy excuse. Now that just stares at her with a completely deadpan look. The young man grumbles that she shouldn't have drunk so much if she was that busy, but is interrupted by a mysterious voice. 3 members of the Kyoto Guild pop up out of nowhere and sarcastically ask for Kagamina-sensei's autograph. The girl with pigtails points at them and suggests that if they don't want trouble, they should pay a tribute to the guild. Seeing the gold pendant around the trio's necks, now recognizes instantly that they belong to the dreaded Kyoto Guild. The girl in the trio asks if Now is her boyfriend and mocks that no one would date such a pathetic woman. Now gets pretty bothered by the group's nerve and breaks into a cold sweat over that annoying situation. The Proto remembers immediately the violent reputation of the guild and how they usually brutally beat their victims. He also recalls Tatishi's terrifying presence and how merciless that spirit world can be. The 3 troublemakers keep standing in front of him with arrogant smiles and flashy poses, but analyzing his opponents closer, now starts thinking they look incredibly weak and harmless. Right after, he checks himself, thinking he shouldn't drop his guard because they might be hiding true power. Now gets their attention and says that just because they are kids doesn't mean they can act so rude. The blonde guy laughs and replies he is 22. The masked guy says he is 23. And the girl claims to be a 25-year-old baby. Finding out they are all older than him, now gets extremely annoyed by so much immaturity. Kano says this whole thing is just a game and starts prepping for direct hand-to-hand combat. Amaki firmly grips the chain of his 2-star scythe, showing he is ready to attack. Memory holds a drink can, and Kano warns that if they have any problem, they can settle it right there. The trio assumes a battle stance and challenges Now to put them in their place through a quick fight. Worried about the situation, Now calls out for Kagamina-sensei to try and warn her about the imminent danger. He warns that the situation is dangerous and asks her to take a step back. But the artist remains totally locked onto her tablet. Desperate seeing the girl simply floated far away, he screams asking if she was even listening. The cherry blossom forest stays calm under the blue sky, but the tension between the fighters keeps rising. Suddenly, a loud impact sound echoes from the top of the pink trees, grabbing everyone's attention. A monster shaped like a horn log crashes violently into the middle of the cherry leaves. Memory points forward and orders Amaki and Kano to protect her at all costs from any threat. With that, Amaki's spiked weapon is launched at high speed straight toward Now. With total ease, the proto raises his leg and kicks the weapon's chain far out of his way. Kano takes advantage of the opening and charges in fast, swinging a powerful punch with his glowing brass knuckles. Now dodges the punch with great agility and notices their attacks are way too simple and super slow. He decides that for now, he would just use his raised leg to block his opponent's next move. However, the second Now raises his leg. Amaki seizes the chance to trap his ankle using the metal chain. Successfully entangling the chain, Amaki yanks hard and celebrates, saying he snagged him. Kano readies another devastating blow and shouts hyped up, believing their victory is already locked in. At that moment, Now activates his shoe's special power, making a strong blue energy flare. Up intensely, he uses the momentum to pull off an awesome aerial sweep kick, completely throwing off both attackers. Amaki lets out a panic scream as he totally loses his balance and gets dragged by his own chain. Both opponents are left completely defenseless in midair while the proto dictates the pace of the clash. With a quick movement, Nio makes both knuckleheads collide violently against each other. In midair, Memory falls into complete despair, watching her two squad mates drop defeated to the ground all at once. She is shocked by the young man's strength and wonders what kind of skill he used to make them vanish from sight. Kagamina-sensei remarks that they actually work well together, but warns that power wouldn't be enough against Tatishi. Not knowing what to do, Memory starts pouring her drink straight into Kano's mouth to try to wake him up. The blonde guy lets out a groan of pain and starts regaining consciousness slowly after the brutal hit. Seeing Kano heal fast, Now realizes the drink the girl was using was actually a healing weapon. Kano snaps up with a sudden shout, fully recovered and startling his companions with his restored energy. The guy inspects his own hands in shock, barely able to believe he survived that brutal fight without a single scratch. Still super confused by the situation, Kano stares at the proto and asks why he didn't finish him off right there. Now says he isn't sadistic like Tatishi and that all they need to do is apologize to the artist and promise to never start trouble again. Kano glares at the proto in silence, completely lost for words and sweating cold at the young man's merciful attitude. The blonde starts explaining himself and reveals they only acted that violently to keep people away from Kagamina-sensei. He vents that they did that to protect them, because if others got close to her, they would end up getting brutally beaten by the guild. Now says he knows the Kyoto guild is full of thugs, but argues nothing justifies harassing someone and gouging their eye out. While the guys talk seriously, the artist stays completely oblivious to her surroundings, focused on finishing her tablet illustration. Kano panics and quickly clarifies that they were not the ones responsible for hurting Kagamina-sensei's eye. The proto is pretty surprised by the revelation and lets out a mutter of doubt, trying to get at what really went down. Suddenly, a booming noise and violent quakes start shaking the whole floor of the cherry blossom forest. A big red system warning pops up in the air, alerting to the immediate start of an emergency quest in the area. Now looks around startled as he sees the red holographic danger barrier rise fast on all sides. The virtual panel glows intensely, indicating that the extreme survival quest will start in just a few minutes. Kano screams in panic, realizing time is running out and they need to move super fast so they don't die there. He warns everyone to run immediately to the escape point while the troublemaker trio starts beating a retreat. Now runs to Kagamina-sensei, warning that the situation is awful, but gets outraged seeing she refuses to stop drawing. At the escape point, Memory and Amaki manage to escape using the portal, leaving Kano a bit behind in the evacuation rush. Suddenly, a loud rumble echoes nearby, and Kano turns around, startled, realizing something super bad just happened. He shoves Memory toward the portal to guarantee the girl's safe exit while a massive root starts bursting from the dirt. The young girl with pigtails lets out a surprise scream as she is sent back through the portal. Before even grasping the situation, the ground splits open completely around Kano under the fury of giant roots that start sprouting violently from the earth. A huge quake launches the blonde into the air while the terrain turns into a true landscape of total destruction. He tries to stay focused, even while falling, and frantically looks for another active escape point in the area. However, a monstrous creature shaped like a giant tree pops up right behind him, opening a massive mouthful of sharp teeth. The two-star monster closes its wooden jaws with extreme force in an attempt to devour the blonde in one bite. Luckily, Now shows up right in time and manages to rescue Kano from the lethal strike, leaving the blonde confused and super relieved. 2. Be alive. The proto orders Kano to carry the artist on his back, while the blonde asks worriedly what he plans to do. Now keeps a firm and resolute look, showing he won't run away without first taking care of that threatening creature. He charges with everything toward the giant monster, set on defeating the enemy to clear a path for their escape. Now lands a powerful kick on one of the branches and notices his physical hits deal real damage to the creature's structure. The big problem is that it is an extremely tough 2-star monster, way more dangerous than the common ones. The young man realizes he won't be able to take down that giant tree with just one strike and needs to swap strategies fast. To make matters worse, more tree-shaped monsters start sprouting from the earth around now in large numbers. Now slides back along the grass and analyzes the enemy horde, completely blocking all safe escape routes. Facing the imminent danger of being swarmed by wooden creatures, he readies himself to use all his boot speed. The Proto takes a deep breath and sets a stance to run at top speed, triggering his special skills blue glow. Meanwhile, Kano keeps sprinting through the forest carrying Kagamina-sensei on his shoulders. As fast as he can, the blonde runs huffing from exhaustion, while the eye-patch girl keeps drawing peacefully, not giving a single care about the chaos. Now, catches up to the two on the run, but Kano complains annoyed, saying the young man shouldn't have brought a monster army behind him. The young man shouts back that he tried to take them down, but it didn't work, and asks the exact distance to the next escape point. Kano shouts back that the spot is still way too far, and now asks frantically if there isn't any closer exit around. The two keep running for dear life, while killer roots charge relentlessly right behind their heels. Kano starts to reply, but is cut short as wooden tendrils grab both young men with massive force, choking them, completely trapped by the creature's dry branches. They groan in pain, while Kagamina-sensei just watches it all sitting on a branch. The beautiful view of the cherry blossom castle in the distance glows under the blue sky, hiding the lethal danger dwelling in that place. Now recalls when he thought this place would just be a pleasant stroll to admire spring's pink flowers. But hard reality hits, revealing that Pretty Field hides a literal sea of blood and fallen players' bodies. Now spits blood while being brutally choked by the tree branches, realizing that Pretty Place is actually a death game. In the last second, Kagamina-sensei decides to act and raises her left hand to release an extremely powerful skill. A colossal dragon with blue wings emerges majestic in the forest skies, blocking out the sun with its imposing presence. The mythical creature spews a devastating stream of blazing fire, instantly incinerating the tree-shaped monster, with the branches destroyed. Now, Kano fall free to the ground, completely shocked by the appearance of the powerful guardian dragon, as the emergency trees are totally incinerated by the flames. Several glowing petal items pop up as rewards. Kagamina-sensei touches down gently with several petals floating around her and apologizes for taking so long to finish her draft. She explains that emergency quest monsters drop awesome rewards and now asks Kano if she really is part of the Kyoto Guild. Still recovering on the ground, the Proto praises her impressive strength and asks why she wears an eye patch. The artist turns slowly with a confused look, seeming to not expect such a sudden question from the young man. She says she only wears it because she thinks it looks stylish. Leaving now so disappointed, he asks if he can quit the job. At the end of the day, Calm returns to the bright, modern streets of the big player city. The group gathers in a secluded city alley in the spirit realm to talk more peacefully about their future. Kagamina-sensei suggests the troublemaker trio join her Soten Go Guild so they can stop taking orders and getting beaten up. Memory turns down the offer spooked, explaining that leaving the influential Thousand Lanterns Guild is an extremely dangerous thing to do. She also explains that by system rules, at least 18 or 5 guild, less players are required to found an official faction. The system panel confirms that the guild creation process demands meeting several strict requirements to succeed. Memory points out that the artist is completely on her own, which makes Now start sweating cold out of nervousness over the lack of members. The Proto shouts outraged, asking if that was a lie too, but she defends herself, saying the whole concept is already in her mind. However, the eye patch girl switches tones and assumes a much more serious and locked in posture to continue explaining. She reveals that all top executives of the powerful Thousand Lanterns Guild are bronze rank or higher fighters. She explains she needs to rank up to be able to fight them on equal footing, but that joining a guild is step 1. The virtual stats screen shows that belonging to an active guild is a mandatory requirement to enter the bronze rank quest. Kagamina-sensei explains with a confident smile that is precisely why the enemy guild sabotages her to keep her from getting members. Bluntly, Now advises the girl to give up once and for all on that absurd idea of founding her own guild in the afterlife. Memory vents sadly, saying the enemy guild's harassment will continue regardless, even if they get beaten. Hearing that, now remembers a cold phrase Tatishi used to say about the weak having no right to voice opinions on anything. The sadistic villain always looked down on normal people, treating anyone weaker as mere trash, although now has zero intention of acting like a hero of justice. He feels deep hatred when accepting the villain's cruel logic. Driven by an urge, he gazes at the trio and asks if they would accept joining the Soten-go EI Guild if he promised to protect them. The unexpected offer leaves Momori and Kano completely in shock, eyes glowing with so much surprise and hope. Amaki also widens his eyes behind his black mask, unable to believe what he just heard from the Prota. Kagamina Sensei rests her hand on her chin and lets out a surprised expression. Sina, young man step up so heroically, awkward under the stares fixed on him, now scratches his head and asks confused if he said something really weird to them. The next day, in the real world, the bright lights of Dotonbori's bustling avenue in Osaka illuminate the city night. Now waits in a suit standing in the middle of a crowded pedestrian bridge and starts grumbling to himself about the group's delay. He recalls the trio crying frantically the day before, begging him to stand by them when they officially quit the guild. Now sighs annoyed, thinking he only agreed to wait in that crowded spot because they seemed truly desperate for help. He analyzes the Thousand Lanterns Guild's power structure and remembers those three idiots are at the absolute bottom of the faction. The young man walks near the canal and reflects that being in the real world under police watch, enemies would avoid causing trouble. Over the comm screen, Kagamina Sensei announces super excited that she will help him on the quest, but the young man politely asks her to focus on her draft. He decides to move forward alone and checks their current location via the temporary friend system they set up yesterday. The virtual map projects the exact location of the trio on a nearby bridge, showing they're all gathered at the same point. Locking his eyes onto the exact spot shown on hologram, the Prota feels a terrible chill spread across his entire body. He sprints to the bridge railing and looks down, praying silently that it isn't what he is picturing. However, the worst happens as he sees the bodies of Kano, Amaki, and Memory, lying motionless over a massive pool of blood floating in the dark water. Now stands completely frozen in deep shock, witnessing that brutal murder scene right before his eyes. Suddenly, a police officer approaches, running toward him suspiciously and shouts, calling the Protos attention on the bridge. The young man turns around, startled by the sudden approach, and stammers an explanation, but is violently cut short. The officer pulls out a revolver and points the gun straight at Nao's forehead, revealing himself to be a disguised killer with a dark gaze. Out of nowhere, a second police officer appears behind him, firing a shot into the fake officer's head and screaming not to mess with his slave. The fake officer is hit clean in the forehead by the violent shot, letting out a scream of surprise before stumbling. Panic spreads instantly across the busy avenue, with pedestrians screaming in terror that the police just shot someone. The shooter grabs his wounded buddy by the collar, who complains about the attack, but hears that all of this would be forgotten anyway. To everyone's surprise, the shot cop stands back up bleeding and laughingly warns they can't die for real in the real world. Right after, the wounded officer collapses to the stone ground, leaving Nao completely shocked and covered in blood splatters. The Prota is horrified to see that the Thousand Lanterns Guild doesn't hesitate to shoot and kill in the middle of a crowded avenue. Waste of zero time, now turns and starts sprinting, triggering his shoe's power, making strong blue energy swirl around him. He spots a water energy attack heading his way and readies himself to dodge using all his agility. The young man manages to dodge the luminous blast by a hair, feeling the heavy pressure of the shot graze past his face. The rookie leader, Hari Kariri, watches the dodge and arrogantly comments that, as expected from Tatishi's disciple, he knows how to defend himself. Kariri smirks with disdain and warns he will tell the Prota something super interesting before finishing him off for good. He explains that if they die at the same time and are in the same rank, the matchmaker almost always throws them in the same game. The villain points the gun and reveals their plan is to murder the young man in reality, to then punish him in the afterlife. Now listens to everything in absolute silence, keeping an extremely serious and focused look in the face of that terrible threat. Kiriri promises to forgive him if he apologizes and joins the enemy guild, but demands an absurd entry fee of 50 million yen. At that moment, a system message pops up in the sky, starting the event to survive for 1 hour against the district's water god. The enemy leader points his pistol and shouts furiously that if the Proto won't apologize, then he had better just die at once. Now leaps toward the villain, delivering a powerful kick charged with blue energy, but the opponent blocks the hit using his arm. The impact of the kick against the block creates a shockwave that sends heavy white smoke billowing across the bridge. The young man slides back along the floor and quickly catches his balance, realizing his opponent's strength is way higher than expected. He gnashes his teeth, frustrated upon noticing that the heavy blow he landed was blocked without dealing any real damage to his opponent. Now is impressed to see that the enemy leader managed to dodge and block an attack so easily using just one arm. Kiruri sets his stance with gun in hand, while the three defeated youths watch everything lying on the ground right behind the villain. With an extremely dark look, the leader deduces that the proto really has zero intention of apologizing to them. The young man gazes at his opponent with determination, prepping for the start of the survival clash about to begin. The massive water creature rises imposing in the sky, confirming the start of the 1-hour event to survive the water god. Pedestrians run in terror down the avenue, screaming for everyone to use nearby buildings as cover against the attacks. The colossal water dragon fires a devastating torrent that charges forward, swallowing everything and quickly flooding the city streets. Several players are swept away by the violent force of the current, letting out screams of despair while trying to grab onto something. Some survivors run laughing and comment that today's daily quest seems to be just a simple game of dodge and agility. Another guy notices the water doesn't destroy physical structures and suggests they just hide inside buildings to wait out the clock. However, a giant water dragon suddenly surges from a puddle and attacks the guy who was trying to hide under cover. The player falls into complete despair as he sees the mythical water jaws snap shut toward him without giving a second to react. Multiple people end up trapped inside floating magical water bubbles, suffocating and screaming in pain without being able to break free. A guy holding a baseball bat backs away, spooked, as he sees the ground get covered in water puddles that start glowing intensely. He is completely horrified to see that every water puddle on the street begins transforming into new smaller dragon monsters. Desperate, he brandishes his improvised weapon and complains that they will have to endure that living hell of attacks for a whole hour, while running to dodge the aquatic monsters. Now looks to the side and notices a super weird movement happening down the avenue. The Prota is outraged by what he sees in the distance and lets out a murmur of disbelief at those players' sheer nerve. He wonders if they really have time to be fighting and trying to kill each other right in the middle of such a tough survival quest. Kariri clicks his tongue annoyed while pointing his revolver toward the opponents, trying to mess up his hunting plans. A virtual cooldown alert pops up in front of the rookie leader's face, making him even more impatient over the delay to fire again. Taking advantage of the cooldown window, now leaps at light speed toward the villain to land a definitive surprise strike. Suddenly, Omaki bursts out of the chaos and grabs Kiruri from behind with all his strength, pinning the leader to help the Prota, even heavily injured and exhausted. The masked youth uses his remaining strength to keep the boss pinned during Nao's attack, using his ally's body as a launching pad. Now, triggering his 1,000-step boots blue energy, jumps even higher into the air. He launches his body in a spectacular acrobatic move, stacking up all possible speed to ensure a clean impact. The Prota lands a devastating flying kick straight toward the enemy leader's face, who remains pinned by Amaki. However, a bald police officer with a facial scar pops up out of nowhere and points a revolver straight at Nao's forehead. Nao reacts fast and land a precise kick on the bald officer's gun, knocking the dangerous aim off target by a hair. The kick's impact shoves the shooter back and creates space for Amaki to break free from the enemy's grip. With nimble and balanced moves, the Prota touches down gently on the ground and assumes his default combat stance. He plants his feet firmly on the bridge, once again activating his 1,000-step shoe's bright blue power for the counterattack. The bald killer doesn't give up and aims the revolver back at the young man, firing without hesitation. Now leaps backward fast to dodge the bullet, keeping his eyes wide open and focused on his rival's moves. With an extremely dark gaze, the shooter commands the other officer to push forward at once to trap the Prota. Suddenly, Kano throws himself into the middle of the fight, using his own body to shield the young man who helped him earlier, face covered in sweat and fatigue. The blonde screams frantically for Nao to get the hell out of there as fast as possible. The Prota is pretty surprised by the protective and unexpected move from a young blonde who used to be his enemy. Kano decides to stay behind and block the corrupt cop's path, buying time for Nao to manage to escape. The blonde thinks of the Prota and silently wonders if the young man is just a complete idiot for trying to help them. He feels extremely guilty and remorseful for all the bad things his guild caused the young man. Recently, Kano reflects that they themselves were the true reason Kureri found and killed the Prota in the real world. He remembers being captured and held hostage at gunpoint by the Thousand Lanterns Guild. Under severe torture and death threats, the trio had no choice but to give up their exact meeting spot to the bosses. He wonders if the Prota really was waiting for them on the bridge just to help them get out of that cruel guild. Kano recalls seeing Nao fighting bravely and risking his own life just to save memory from the bald kidnappers' hands. The blonde admits Now had every right in the world to hate them and even kill them after they were so cowardly toward him. Even after the betrayal, the Proto preferred to use his agility to disarm the enemy and give the trio a new shot at salvation. Kano questions why Now still insisted on giving them the choice to pick a different, better path in the afterlife. He stares at the Proto, eyes filled with emotion and deep respect, feeling something he had never felt before in his life. The young blonde admits he never imagined there could be genuinely good and selfless people like the Proto. He remembers when they traveled together in the van and how his friends' jokes and banter helped him forget his troubles. Memory and Amaki used to laugh at their own past misfortunes, sharing the pain and hardships of their previous lives. The trio of friends always lived in absolute misery since childhood, having only each other to lean on through the suffering. In those cold times, they just wished they could be born into normal families and lead quiet, peaceful lives in their next incarnation. Back to the heat of current combat. Now keeps jumping around, trying to find an opening in the opponent's solid defense. The bald killer cracks a wicked smile, predicting the exact spot the young man will land and prepping to fire the kill shot. Out of nowhere, a glowing blue chain shoots out and hits the officer's gun with massive force, disarming him instantly. Now widens his eyes as he sees the revolver rip from the enemy's hand, realizing he just got unexpected outside help. On the bridge, Kano and Amaki quickly take positions alongside the Proto, showing they decided to fight together to the end. Amaki pulls his chain back with a serious and firm look, getting ready to back up their squads. Combined assault. Memory takes advantage of the bald kidnapper's distraction to try and break free from the officer's grip once and for all. Kano charges with blind fury, gathering powerful blue energy in his glowing brass knuckles to strike the rival's face. The blonde lands a devastating punch, clean against the bald kidnapper's cheek, tearing his mask with the impact. The hit leaves a deep mark of fury on the villain's face, but he refuses to drop. Even after taking the violent punch, the bald officer stays standing, like a literal relentless giant, glaring at the youths with a look packed with pure hatred. Keeping his combat focus, Now takes advantage of the close distance to prepare another powerful kick against his opponent. The bald enemy notices the Proto's rapid approach and widens his eyes, realizing he won't have time to block the strike. With an acrobatic leap, Now lands an awesome flying kick straight to the bald cop's jaw, shattering his guard. The kick's violent impact sends the officer's helmet flying, spraying blood and completely breaking the enemy's defense. The villain is launched backward with extreme violence. Due to the crushing blow landed by the Proto mid-fight, the officer's skull slams hard into the bridge floor as he bleeds heavily from the severe damage caused by the kick's impact. Now touches down with his back to the fallen enemy and takes a deep breath, believing for a split second the battle finally ended there. However, a strange bright purple light begins radiating from the fallen villain's body, leaving the Proto pretty confused. Extremely destructive purple lightning bolts start slicing through the air around them, forming literal electrical barriers of energy. The whole squad is struck by the overwhelming electrical discharge, letting out deep groans of pain as they are paralyzed by the attack. Kiriri stands up from the middle of the lightning with a bloody, sadistic grin, mocking their nerve for trying to fight without having skills. Now is shocked to hear about the enemy's special skill, and drops to his knees on the ground, unable to move due to the lightning paralysis. Kiriri points his pistol straight at Nao's forehead, tauntingly asking if the young man remembers getting shot, with the revolver pressed against his face. The Proto breaks into a cold sweat, feeling absolute terror take over. Now desperately tries to force his own body to react and move under the painful paralysis of the enemy's purple lightning. He wills with all his strength to take at least one step, fighting against the paralyzing physical block. However, Kuri ruthlessly shoots Nao's thigh, violently striking his femoral artery. The young man lets out a bloody scream of pure agony and extreme pain as he feels the bullet's devastating impact in his leg. The villain laughs sadistically and explains the Proto will bleed out in minutes due to the fatal artery wound. Kiruri turns his back laughing and tells the young man to enjoy the final minutes of the death survival game before dying for good. Down and bleeding heavily, Now gnashes his teeth in pain while watching the giant water dragon approach in the sky. In that near-death moment, he remembers his little sister Natsu's sweet smile happily, welcoming him back home. The Proto lets a heavy tear roll down his face, realizing he cannot afford the luxury of abandoning his sister again. He calls himself an idiot and remembers getting brutally stabbed and killed in the real world, knowing he can't accept dying again. He recalls leveling up in the system and letting himself get carried away by pride and the fake feeling that he was invincible. Just because he managed to survive the fight against Atishi in the past, the young man ended up making a terrible error in judgment. He foolishly believed he could beat any opponent who was theoretically weaker than the powerful blonde. Suddenly, Kano leaps in with everything, swinging a punch packed with energy to clear the threats surrounding the Proto. The blonde shouts with determination and charges bravely to protect Nao's injured body against the dangers around. He uses his own body as a shield to cover the Proto on the ground, while the heavy water torrent crashes down over them. Nao looks at his ally in shock, unable to believe the blonde is risking his own life to save him like that. Kano screams desperately for Memory to bring the healing potion quick and help save the wounded Proto. The girl in the trio sprints toward them and grabs Nao's suit to start emergency first aid. Memory forces the Proto to drink the healing soda, while a severe leg wound begins glowing intensely. She warns, panting, that that magical drink can't completely close up a wound that is truly fatal. Kano complains tiredly that the war of attrition is awful, and that the water monster keeps multiplying endlessly. Meanwhile, Omaki uses all his skill to swing his chain scythe against the creatures that keep popping up. He manages to entangle his metal chains around one of the smaller water dragons to neutralize its movements. Omaki suggests they just pin the water creatures so they can't attack, leaving Kano pretty surprised. Back on the ground, Nao asks what a special skill actually is, but the trio admits no one there has a single clue. The young man silently reflects that the terrible purple electricity attack the enemy used was something completely different from anything else. He knows that if he gets hit by that paralysis again, it will be his end, and starts searching for a clue to beat the villain. He remembers when the cooldown panel popped up in front of Kariri's face. While he tried to fire the revolver again, the young man pieces together all the clues from Kariri's previous moves, and suddenly starts understanding the secret behind his rival's power. He recalls how the enemy was vulnerable whenever he dodged a physical hit or tried to reload his gun. The virtual panel showing the weapon's cooldown timer was the biggest weak spot and sole opening in the rookie leader's solid defense. With eyes glowing with determination, Nao finally understands the enemy's weakness and alerts his squad mates that he cracked the plan. He stands up in the water while Omaki warns Spooked that the water level on the avenue is rising fast from the ground up. Kano shouts, surprised as he notices the small water dragon attacking them simply vanished in the middle of the sudden flood. The blonde looks around super confused and tense, feeling a way bigger danger is about to emerge beneath their feet. All of Dotonbori Avenue gets completely submerged under dark water, and everyone wonders where the giant dragon went. Suddenly, the water god's colossal silhouette appears right beneath them in the flooded water, setting up a terrifying surprise attack. The creature's massive jaws glow brightly under the water surface, about to swallow the whole squad in one bite. Kano and Omaki drop in absolute panic upon realizing the colossal size of the sea monster about to attack from below. The monster emerges violently like a giant geyser, launching all four youths at high speed straight into the sky. Kano lets out a scream of pure terror as he is dragged by the extreme force of the water, feeling his body yanked violently. The blonde complains the speed is too high and that his arm will tear, but Nao holds him firm and warns the system will heal it later. Nao warns determinedly that they are settling scores with Karuri right now, but Momori screams in panic, suggesting they head for a safe zone. The Proto leaps carrying the girl and states the enemy is in the safest zone of all, making it the perfect time to strike. He explains Karuri picked the safest spot precisely because he is the one most terrified of dying there. With a fierce and resolute battle roar, Nao charges through the sky toward the rookie leader to deliver the final blow. Meanwhile, in the background, other players scream in panic as they are devoured by the water dragon's monstrous jaws in the flood. While trying to reload his pistol as fast as possible, Karuri runs up the stairs to escape the avenue's flood. Midway up, another survivor tries to attack him, using an umbrella to clear a path on the staircase. The man gets outraged by the block and glares at the corrupt cop with an expression full of rage and impatience. Without any mercy, Karuri lands a violent kick on the man and aggressively commands him to get out of his way. The survivor ends up tumbling down the staircase straight into the flood below, while Karuri keeps rushing up. He runs as fast as his legs can carry him, making loud metallic footsteps echo across the stair structure. The rookie leader finally reaches a high building's safe rooftop and sighs relieved upon seeing the flood right below him. He reflects that the stage floods after a while and that the colossal dragon actively starts hunting players like in a shark movie. However, Kirui feels a chill down his spine as he hears his soft footsteps approaching. Right behind him on the building rooftop, now pops up right behind him, silently and sarcastically, thanks the enemy leader for guiding them to a safe spot. The entire squad lands on the rooftop after being launched by the giant geyser, leaving the villain completely in shock at their appearance. The Prota sports a defiant smile and sarcastically remarks that, since it was his first time there, his help was super valuable. Giving no time for reactions, now charges with extreme speed and sweeps Kariri to the floor with a relentless trip. He lands a powerful kick to the enemy leader's jaw, making his opponent groan in extreme pain. Upon being hit flush, the young man keeps a serious and firm look, showing he is totally set on ending that conflict right there. Kano screams worriedly, warning that the wound on Nao's thigh is still bleeding heavily, even after using the magic drink. Kariri gets back up furious, cussing out the young man as an immortal cockroach, but now just points at himself and challenges him to shoot if he has the guts. The enemy leader glares at the young man with bloodshot eyes of pure hatred, but can't fire due to a system restriction. With a confident smile on his face, now stares at his opponent up close and states with absolute certainty that he can't do a thing right now. He explains that compared to a regular shot, the weapon's cooldown after using a special skill is way longer. The young man recalls when the enemy leader used the paralysis attack and how he was left vulnerable right after to reload the pistol. Now exposes the enemy's secret, explaining in detail that the cooldown time after using an AoE skill is extremely long. The virtual cooldown bar keeps filling up slowly in front of Kariri, confirming the Prota's brilliant theory. The villain gets visibly frustrated and tense as he realizes his biggest weak spot was completely exposed and figured out by his rival. Now says his biggest mistake was being scared of the cooldown risk, and that cowardice was the real reason for his defeat in that fight. Kano and Amaki prepare to charge at the leader, suggesting they jump him in a group to make him pay for all the real-world deaths. However, now stops them by raising his hand and states it wouldn't be fair for 4 people to jump someone who is temporarily defenseless. The young man silently agrees with his own logic, keeping a calm and very focused expression on his goals. He steps up and announces he will fight the enemy leader solo in direct combat as a form of handicap. The absurd decision leaves Kano completely stunned and confused, unable to get the Prota's generous logic. Meanwhile, Kariri nervously observes that his pistol's cooldown bar is almost full, about to unlock. Now smiles confidently and proposes a deal, saying that if he wins the fight, the 3 youths must officially join his guild. The enemy leader gnashes his bloody teeth in deadly hatred upon hearing the bold terms proposed by the Prota on the bridge. Kariri points the reloaded pistol and shouts furiously, asking what on earth that damn kid thinks he is saying. However, before even managing to pull the trigger, he realizes in horror that the Prota vanished from his direct line of sight, now pops up upside down, landing a devastating vertical kick that connects clean with Kariri's jaw with massive power. The kick's brutal impact crumples the rookie leader's face and sprays blood in the air completely, shattering his rival's solid defense. The Prota touches down on the floor in a nimble stance and immediately prepares for the next combined move. He spins his body fast and lands a heavy punch to the side of Kariri's face, launching his opponent violently onto the floor. Bleeding heavily, the villain widens his eyes in horror as he realizes the Prota's movements are way faster than before. Watching it all from afar, Kano finally gets the Prota's genius strategy and lets out a mutter of total surprise. The blonde realizes that while running from the giant dragon earlier, now was actually stacking experience to level up. Now reflects that, owning only a basic rank weapon, he learned early on to value every single level and stat gained. The Prota recalls his past fights and how every tiny increase in system strength was crucial for his daily survival. He lands another devastating blue energy kick that hits the enemy leader and blasts him with brutal force toward the ledge. The young man touches down clean on the rooftop, but right after widens his eyes in shock, looking toward the building's edge. He realizes in panic that Kariri completely lost consciousness from the blow's impact and is about to plummet off the high rooftop. The enemy cop's foot slips slowly off the concrete edge, starting a dangerous free fall toward the flood. Now sprints frantically toward the edge upon noticing his opponent fainted and will die from the fall's impact if he drops from there. He reaches out his arm with all his determination in an attempt to grab him, praying to make it in time to save his rival. Now reaches out his hand desperately to try and snag Kariri before he drops into the dark abyss of the flood. He manages to grab the villain's wrist firm, trying to stop him from plummeting straight to certain death. However, Kariri reveals he is conscious and cracks a sadistic grin, grabbing the young man's arm to pull him along in the fall. The villain laughs, saying the Prota is going down with him, leaving now super tense over that suicidal move. No, realizes that if he uses a kick to break free now, the force of the hit will end up killing Kariri instantly in the fall. He hesitates for a second upon noticing that if he falls with his enemy, both will drop right into the sea monster's mouth. Seeing the water god's colossal jaws open right below, the young man needs to make a drastic call in fractions of a second. In the end, Now chooses to let go of the villain and push himself back, while Kiriri drops helpless toward the water abyss. The giant water dragon snaps its colossal jaws shut and devours Kiriri once and for all in the middle of the heavy current. Now drops in the water right after, exhausted and still, bleeding heavily from the severe thigh wound he suffered during combat. A massive water splash rises on the flooded avenue as the young man falls, finally managing to survive the terrible event. Later, back on the guild's safe rooftop, Kano inspects his own body and celebrates, relieved upon realizing he is still alive. Now remains sitting in absolute silence on the stone floor, trying to recover his strength and process everything that went down there. Kano watches the Proto in silence for a few moments with a serious and thoughtful look on his face. The blonde walks over slowly and places his hand on the young man's shoulder, thanking him sincerely for saving their lives. The Proto stares at his ally, surprised to hear the humble thanks coming from the youth who used to act so hostile. Kano remembers all of Now's heroic actions and realizes he truly is a genuinely good person, worthy of complete trust. Now cracks a gentle, comforting smile at his new guild mates, feeling he made the right call. He advises the trio to never do bad things again from here on out, while the system confirms the survival quest success. Sometime later, back in the real world, Now is standing in his boss's office at a Toku pharmaceutical, listening to the man call his name. The company manager asks worriedly if the Proto holds any grudge or resentment toward him over recent decisions. Now blinks his eyes, confused, and lets out a murmur of doubt as he is still trying to get his bearings after returning from the game. He analyzes the modern, quiet office, trying to mentally calculate how much time passed since he was killed in reality. The young man asks the exact date and time of that moment, and the boss replies it is already late on April 4th. Intrigued by the question, Now calculates he lost about 18 hours of real time between his physical passing and the end of the survival quest. He apologizes, laughing to his boss, and asks what they were talking about before he got distracted by his thoughts. The boss explains the sketchy vitamins they sold landed in court, justifying the young man's natural resentment. He reveals the sales department will be dissolved due to the scandal, and that Now will be transferred or can resign. Suddenly, a virtual alert sound echoes in front of the Proto, bringing a new glowing blue alert from the game system. The panel indicates the bronze rank promo quest was unlocked successfully after he officially joined a guild. Now stares at the floating screen with a locked-in look, understanding he will have to face major challenges to rank up in the game. Set on training his physical strength in reality. Now requests a transfer to the company warehouse's stock and shipping section. Later, back in the flashy Player City, the Cherry Blossom Petal Hunt event remains active throughout the district. The Proto walks in his suit under the massive traditional red archway, complaining that place stays way too bright and flashy. He looks around calmly, trying to spot his guild mates to start their planned activities for the night. Now recognizes the street candy vendor and tries to greet him in a friendly way, waving cheerfully at the shopkeeper. However, the shopkeeper panics upon recognizing the young man and flees in a rush, dragging his cart far away from the Proto. Now gets bummed out being ignored like that, but remembers that as a door-to-door salesman, he is already used to rejection. Kagamina-sensei approaches in sandals and casually remarks that the candy vendor's reaction is perfectly normal there. She explains the Sotengo Guild is seen as a bunch of dangerous rebels by the influential Lantern Merchant Union. As they walk, she reveals she bought a well-equipped and safe guild house to serve as the perfect hideout for the youth trio. Now is pretty impressed by the news and asks about the place while she gestures, pointing to a red wooden door. The artist brings a glowing gold key close to the stone floor, making small magical water ripples pop up on the surface. With the spell active, the red wooden door magically transforms into a large fabric curtain bearing the guild's emblem. She pulls back the fabric, smiling, and explains proudly that only official members registered in the guild have permission to pass through. Now peeks through the curtain opening with eyes wide, completely blown away by what he sees on the other side of the magical entry. The young man is dazzled to see the hideout is actually a massive, high-end traditional inn under a beautiful starry sky. Kagamine-sensei proudly explained she designed and decorated the whole luxury in exactly how she wanted after buying the plot. Suddenly, a ghostly pet monster with a halo pops up floating and greets them happily, asking them to take off their shoes. Now's mouth drops at the creature's colossal size, realizing surprise that pet monsters are way more than just mere mascots. The floating ghost gets extremely annoyed at being called a mascot and demands respect, making Now pretty embarrassed. It threatens to scrub the young man till his skin comes off if he disrespects it again, making the proto-apologize spooked. Kagemina-sensei leads a young man down a long wooden hallway with sliding doors in the pretty traditional inn. She stops in front of one of the doors and alerts now that all new guild members are gathered inside that room. Upon opening the door, Now is bewildered to see the troublemaker trio sitting at tables, drawing intently on tablets and laptops. Kano apologizes, sweating cold, and explains they are working hard to help finish the manuscript for Kagemina's new manga. Memori also works non-stop on her own drawing tablet, looking super exhausted and under time pressure. Amaki focuses completely on his screen to help with production, showing the group became a true team of assistants. The artist happily explains they help with illustrations in exchange for shelter, and that she plans to recoup the guild house cost with the manga. Now widens his eyes in total shock upon hearing the astronomical price tag of 100 million yen invested in the resting spot. The prota stares at the rookie leader with a look of pure dread, sweating cold in the face of that multi-million sum of money. He notices awkwardly that the main character of her manga is a regular salaryman who looks crazy similar to his own appearance. Kagemina-sensei reassures him that the character already existed before they met, and now sighs defeated, saying she can use his likeness with zero problem. She lies down comfortably eating chips and alerts that her goal was already met. Upon securing that safe guild base, the artist warns that the dangerous Thousand Lanterns Merchant Union keeps actively hunting guildless rookie players. She recalls how rookies usually suffer and endure severe bullying from those influential spirit underworld criminals. She alerts she will stay at the base to protect the trio, and says that if Now wants to rank up, he should recruit allies and set out on the quest. Now stares at the girl lying around lazily from afar, before shutting the door, processing all the important info she passed along. Sometime later, the young man decides to unwind in one of the luxury outdoor hot springs, located inside the guild inn. He enjoys the hot bath under the full moon's glow, and ponders the rumor that ranking up grants a wish fulfilled by the system. To Now, being able to relax every day in a luxury inn like that is already a way bigger reward than any other prize. The young man thinks it would be great to live and rest there forever, but is tormented again by the scary memory of Tatishi. The blonde villain's sinister promise that he would be the next target echoes in his mind, making the prota tremble in dread in the hot water. He checks his friend list on the virtual hologram and confirms with anxiety that Tatishi is active participating in some game quest. The prota exchanges texts with his sister Natsu to check if she is okay, and wonders what he is actually so afraid of in the afterlife. Meanwhile, the special glowing cherry blossom petal harvest quest is officially restarted across the rookie district. In the middle of the event's pink scenery, a rookie player drops to the ground terrified upon spotting the powerful Tatishi in the beginner's room, with a sweet but extremely sadistic smile on his lips. The blonde villain calmly replies he is only there to find a disciple. The villain mockingly remarks that new apprentices usually take a ton of exhausting effort to be properly trained. A giant shadow creature rises roaring fiercely behind him, but Tadashi doesn't show the slightest hint of fear facing the danger. He calmly sparks his gold winged lighter and states that new apprentices easily lose focus if he turns his eyes away for a single second. With a destructive burst of his golden flames, the villain incinerates the monster instantly and asks the fallen guy if he accepts the test. Crying in dread and fearing for his life, the rookie begs desperately and says he will do anything, pleading with the villain not to kill him. With a bright, disturbing smile, Tadashi alerts he will give the guy a golden chance to officially become his new apprentice.